Imagine climbing out of a trench at 7:30 in the morning, walking across an open field whilst machine guns tear your mates to pieces around you, and absolutely knowing that you're probably going to die in the next few minutes. Now imagine nearly 60,000 men experiencing exactly that on a single day. One day. Welcome to the 1st of July, ke-1916. The day that Somme became synonymous with slaughter. This isn't just another war story. This is about the bloodiest day in British military history. And here's the kicker: the generals knew it was coming, the Germans knew it was coming, and those poor lads climbing out of the trenches, they suspected it too, but they went anyway. Let me paint you a picture of Europe in ke-1916. The entire continent had gone absolutely mental. World War I was tearing everything apart. Along the Western Front, British, French, and the German armies were locked in the maze of all stalemates. 450 miles of trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. Millions had already died, and neither side could break through. Why? Because warfare had fundamentally changed, and nobody had quite figured it out yet. You had barbed wire that could shred a man to ribbons, machine guns that could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, artillery that could turn entire landscapes into moonscapes. Crossing no more man's land, that hellish strip of chonders between opposing trenches, was basically suicide. The defender always had the advantage, always, but the Allies were determined. They wanted to liberate the bits of France and Belgium that Germany had occupied in the first months of the war. So Britain and France agreed to launch a massive joint offensive in summer ke-1916. Finally break this deadlock once and for all. Except the Germans had other ideas. In February, they launched their own massive assault on Verdun, a French fortress city. The fighting was so intense, so absolutely brutal, that it sucked in every available French reserve. Suddenly, the summer offensive became primarily a British show, the biggest attack Britain had launched in the war so far. And its main purpose had changed. It wasn't just about breaking through anymore. It was about taking pressure off the French at Verdun, who were being blood white. The attack would happen along a 25-mile front near the River Somme in July. General Sir Douglas Haig, the new British commander, would have preferred attacking near Ypres, where there were clear strategic objectives. But the Somme was where British and the French forces met, so that's where a joint offensive had to take place. He also would have liked more time to train his inexperienced divisions, but the French needed help immediately. Time was a luxury Britain didn't have. The Somme had been relatively quiet up until then, which meant the Germans had spent months building absolutely formidable defenses. We're talking about 2 complete defensive lines with assault under construction. Each line consisted of 3 trenches, fire, support, and the reserve, all connected by communication trenches. Machine gun positions everywhere. Fortified villages, strong points that could withstand tremendous punishment. And in front of everything, thick belts of barbed wire that would make a Somme bush look friendly. But here's what made it truly terrifying. Below ground, the Germans had built dugouts 10 meters deep, deep enough to survive almost any artillery bombardment. They had telephone lines buried 6 feet down so communications wouldn't be choked during an attack. These weren't amateur soldiers either. These were well-trained veterans who knew exactly what they were doing. One British soldier, seeing all this, muttered, "They know we're coming all right." The offensive would be led by the British 4th Army under Lieutenant General Sir Henry Rawlinson. Together with Haig, they drew up the battle plan. The solution to Germany's formidable defenses? Artillery. Massive, overwhelming artillery. They'd carry out a week-long bombardment with 1,400 guns. This was expected to destroy German barbed wire, flatten trenches, and kill everyone in them. Simple, right? They also dug 19 mines under key German strongpoints and filled them with explosives, ready to detonate just before the attack. To the north, the British Third Army would make a diversionary attack at Gamcourt. Then 16 British and the French infantry divisions would advance and take their objectives with minimal opposition. The attack would begin at 7:30 in the morning, in broad daylight, so the artillery could see where it was firing. British morale was sky high. The men were confident of victory. Man units taking part were Pals battalions, those eager recruits from 1914 who signed up together from the same towns and the villages, now about to face combat for the first time. Mates fighting alongside mates. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. On the eve of the assault, worrying reports started coming in. The British bombardment had been only partially successful. They'd fired 1,6 million shells, but due to inexperienced gun crews, a shortage of heavy guns, and faulty shells that were essentially duds, much of the German barbed wire remained intact. The Germans themselves, largely unscathed in their deep dugouts, just waiting for the bombardment to stop. And they knew exactly when and where the British were coming. Captured prisoners had talked. British soldiers were making uncoded telephone calls that the Germans were listening to. There was no more element of surprise whatsoever. The Allied artillery bombardment reached its crescendo at 7 in the morning. At 20 past 7, the British detonated an enormous mine under a German strongpoint called the Hawthorne Redoubt. British troops rushed forward to occupy the crater. At 7:28, more mines exploded under German strongpoints along the front. At 7:30, the Allied bombardment shifted to the German second line as British and the French infantry began their advance across Normandy. Meanwhile, German troops were racing up from their dugouts, setting up machine guns, and preparing to welcome their visitors. Now, there's an enduring myth about what happened next, that all the British infantry climbed out of their trenches and walked slowly, steadily towards the German line like they were on parade. That's not entirely accurate. A few units did that, but most sent men into no more man's land before the bombardment lifted, trying to make that final dash to the enemy line as short as possible. In the northern sector, whatever tactics they used, the British became easy targets for German machine gunners, especially where they bunched up trying to get through the few gaps in the barbed wire that the artillery had actually chewed. The British infantry advanced bravely, incredibly bravely, but they were mown down in their hundreds, just chewed to pieces. Some units did break into the German line. Near Sipfel, the 36th Ulster Division captured the Schwaben Redoubt, but without support on either flank, they were isolated. The survivors had to retreat that night. On their right, the 32nd Division took the Leipzig Redoubt. Near La Boisselle, the 34th Division captured the Lohnagar mine crater, but these were just small toeholds in the German line, far short of their objectives. Here's something you need to understand about World War I. One of the greatest challenges commanders faced was getting accurate information about what was actually happening. Reliable field radios hadn't been invented yet. Telephone lines were constantly chewed by shellfire, so officers had to rely on messengers, flag signals, light signals, even homing pigeons, none of which was particularly reliable. To work around this problem, supporting artillery operated on a fixed timetable during attacks. They'd move their fire onto the next line of enemy defenses at a set time, whether the infantry had reached the first line or not. So when infantry started their attack, the gunners would adjust their fire onto the second enemy line. But if the infantry got held up and they often did, the supporting fire kept moving on according to schedule. The infantry got left behind and they found themselves at the mercy of enemy machine guns. Aerial observation from balloons and the aircraft could provide valuable information, but that relied on good weather and the control of the skies. This is why on the 1st of July, it took British commanders hours, even days, to find out which attacks had succeeded and which had failed catastrophically. It made reacting to the situation with any speed nearly impossible. Further south, though, things went much better. Despite heavy losses, the 21st and the 7th Divisions took Mametz and chewed off the heavily defended village of Fricourt, which the Germans abandoned overnight. On their right, the 18th and the 30th Divisions took their objectives, including the village of Montauban, which was secured by 11 in the morning. Alongside them, the veteran French 20th Corps also took its first-day objectives, along with 2,500 German prisoners. Why did the South succeed where the North failed? The Germans hadn't expected the offensive to extend that far south and they were less well prepared. And crucially, the Allied bombardment was boosted by French heavy guns, which were far more effective at destroying barbed wire and the German strongpoints. At 9:30 in the morning, French colonial troops led the attack south of the Somme River. The French seized all their objectives and they took 3,000 more prisoners. Despite success in the south, the first day of the Battle of the Somme was a costly failure for Britain. German losses for the day were estimated at 12,000 men. The French lost 7,000. But the British suffered a staggering 57,000 casualties, one-third of them killed. Let that sink in. 57,000 casualties in a single day. The 1st of July 1916 became the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army, and it was just the first day. The battle raged for another 4 months, finally ending in November amid freezing rain and the mud that swallowed men whole. By then, the Allies had advanced 10 miles, at a cost of 430,000 British casualties, 200,000 French casualties, and 450,000 German. It made the Battle of the Somme one of the bloodiest battles in human history. In British popular memory, the Somme is remembered as an unmitigated disaster, evidence of incompetent generals sending brave soldiers to pointless deaths. Lions led by donkeys, as the saying goes. And there's truth to that criticism. The planning had serious flaws. The artillery bombardment failed. The tactics were questionable at best. But here's the thing, to those who fought it, and to those at home, the Battle of the Somme was actually seen as a success. Not a victory, mind you, but a success. How can that be? How can such staggering losses be considered anything but catastrophic failure? You have to understand the context. Casualties were enormous and they had to bear, absolutely. But across Europe, every warring nation was suffering terrible losses. Every commander was struggling to find an answer to trench warfare. Nobody had figured it out yet. The technology had changed faster than the tactics could adapt. At the Somme, the British had helped save their French ally, who went on to defeat the Germans at Verdun. They'd learned vital lessons about how to fight on the Western Front, lessons that would prove crucial in the years ahead. Most importantly, the Battle of the Somme had been a costly but necessary wearing down of the German army, an immensely painful but vital step on the long road to victory. The German army never fully recovered from the losses at the Somme. Combined with Verdun, it had bled the German military white. Yes, the British and the French suffered terribly, but Germany, with fewer resources and a smaller population, couldn't sustain those losses. The Somme, combined with the naval blockade and the Americas' eventual entry into the war, set Germany on an irreversible path to defeat. Does that justify the casualties? That's not for me to say. War is horror. War is waste. War is young men dying in mood for objectives that seem meaningless when you're the one being shot at. But understanding why decisions were made, understanding the strategic situation, understanding the limitations commanders face, that's important. It doesn't excuse mistakes, but it provides context. The Pals battalion suffered particularly devastating losses. Entire towns and the villages lost their young men in a single day. The close-knit communities that had signed up the Geyser now grieved the Geyser. The social impact was profound and lasting. The Somme changed Britain. It shattered illusions about the glory of war. It created a generation that would be known as the Lost Generation. It influenced literature, art, politics, and the society for decades to come. The scars ran deep, but it also demonstrated something else. The incredible courage and the determination of ordinary men facing extraordinary horror. They knew what awaited them over the top. Man suspected they wouldn't survive. And they went anyway, because their mates were going, because duty demanded it, because they believed in the cause. That's not stupidity. That's not blind obedience. That's courage of a kind that's difficult to comprehend from the comfortable distance of a century later. So when you hear about the Somme, remember it's not just statistics. It's not just another military disaster to be picked apart by armchair generals. It's 57,000 individual tragedies on a single day. It's fathers, sons, brothers, husbands who never came home. It's communities torn apart. It's lives unlived and the potential unfulfilled. But it's also resilience. It's adaptation. It's the British Army learning, evolving, and ultimately helping to win the war. The lessons of the Somme about the need for better artillery tactics, better communications, better coordination between infantry and the supporting arms would prove invaluable in the battles ahead. If you found this dive into one of history's darkest days both sobering and fascinating, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories from history that deserve to be remembered, not as abstract events, but as human experiences. Drop a comment below what other pivotal moments from the Great War should we explore. History isn't just dates and the battles. It's people, it's decisions, it's consequences that echo through generations. Until next time, remember those 57,000 casualties weren't just numbers in a history book. They were real people who woke up that morning not knowing it would be their last. We owe it to them to understand why, even if we can never fully understand what they endured.